Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today's tutorial should be a fun one. We're making a cozy cable sweetheart sweater. Cables, balloon sleeve, and the sweetest neckline. What's not to love? Speaking of, if you're looking for more sweaters you can love, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of the easiest to follow crochet tutorials and patterns, with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 605 grams of yarn. That's 1,345 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 6 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us which landscape you find more breathtaking, mountains or waterfalls. Definitely waterfalls for me. We're using 6 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, treble crochet, and double treble crochet. This tutorial is made for size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook, and we're all going to start by making a chain 16 because we're all getting started with our cable stitch detail first. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a half double crochet row. Start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here, yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we are going to insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. That's our first half double crochet. From here, continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. We have just completed our row 1. Everyone's row 2 is going to be a single crochet row. So chain 1, that's our turning chain. Flip our work and simply put 1 single crochet into every stitch, still for a total of 16 stitches. Everyone's row 2 is complete. Now we're all going to get started on our row 3, which is our first cable stitch row. So we're all going to chain 2, that's our turning chain, and flip our work. Now when it comes to working our cable stitches, they're always going to be done within the odd number rows, and we're going to be doing post stitches, so it's always going to be inserted into our previous odd number row. So since we're working on our row 3, we're going to be inserting our hook underneath our row 1. So it's always going to start with our dividing stitch, which is going to be 1 front post treble crochet. To get that started, we're going to yarn over twice. Taking a look at our row 1, we're going to find that first half double crochet, not that chain 2. We're going to insert our hook underneath the body of that first half double crochet and through the other side. Then from here, yarn over and pull through. Then yarn over and pull through 2 until we all have 1 loop left on our hook. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. Now that is going to be our first stitch. Now to do the actual cable stitch detail, we're all going to start with 2 front post double treble crochets. So yarn over 1, 2, 3 times now. Taking a look at our row 1, we are going to be skipping those following 2 stitches. So here's 1, here's 2. Then we're going to be putting 1 front post double treble crochet into the following 2 stitches. So like I said, skip 1, skip 2. Underneath the body of that following half double crochet, insert your hook underneath, through the other side, yarn over, pull through. Then from here, yarn over and pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That is our first front post double treble. We're going to be doing another into that following stitch. So yarn over 1, 2, 3 times again. Underneath the body of that stitch, insert your hook underneath and through the other side, pull through. Again, yarn over, pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. And that is our 2 front post double treble crochets next to each other. Now we're going to be working into our 2 skipped stitches. So here's my first, here's my second. 1 front post double treble crochet is going to be worked into those as well. So yarn over 3 times. We're going to bring our hook back into that first skip stitch, bring your hook down underneath that body and through the other side, yarn over and pull through. From here, yarn over and pull through 2 until you have 1 loop left on our hook again. There's our first. We should all have 1 more skip stitch left over. So 1 more front post double treble into that skip stitch. So bring your hook back underneath the body of that stitch, through the other side, pull through. Then from here, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2. Now once we have that crossover, we're going to be doing 2 front post treble crochets. So yarn over twice now. Finding that next available stitch from our row 1, insert your hook underneath the body of that stitch, through the other side, pull through. Then from here, yarn over, pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. Then another front post treble crochet underneath that following stitch. So underneath that next half double, through the other side, pull through. Then yarn over and pull through 2 till we have 1 loop left. Now the cable stitch detail is complete, and we're going to finish it off with our dividing stitch, which is always going to be a front post treble crochet into that following stitch. So yarn over twice. Underneath the body of that next stitch, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2. Now our first cable stitch detail is complete. Now in between our cable stitches, we are going to do an alpine stitch detail, but we need to prep for that, so all we're going to do from here is simply chain 1. Then we're going to do our left cable, which is going to mirror what we just did here. So we're going to start with our dividing stitch. Now we're going to insert our hook underneath that same stitch that this dividing stitch was into. So yarn over twice because our dividing stitch is always a front post treble. Bring your hook down underneath that same occupied stitch, through the other side, pull through, and per usual, pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. Now once we have that, we're going to get started on the rest of the cable. So into the next 2 stitches, 1 front post treble crochet is worked into each. So yarn over twice. Still looking at our row 1, we're going to find that next available half double crochet, bring your hook down underneath the body of that stitch, through the other side, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, 2, 2, 1 more front post treble crochet into that following stitch. So yarn over twice again. Underneath the body of that stitch, pull through, and then pull through 2, 2, 2 again. Then once we have those 3 front post treble crochets, but that first one is our dividing stitch, we're now going to do a set of 2 front post double treble crochets. So yarn over 1, 2, 3 times. Taking a look at our row 1, we're going to skip the following 2 stitches and then 1 front post double treble crochet into each of the following 2. So skip 1, skip 2. Underneath that following, with 1 front post double treble crochet. So just insert and continue to pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. Into that following stitch, another front post double treble crochet. So same thing, insert, pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. And now we're going to have to work into those 2 skip stitches. But for this one, we're now going to be working into that little window that we made for ourselves. So still using our front post double treble crochets, yarn over 1, 2, 3 times. Hang on to your working yarn because it can very easily fall off. We're going to pull our work down and finding those 2 skip stitches into that window. So pull your work down, and these are my 2 skip stitches. Here's my first, here's my second. Underneath the first one, I'm going to insert my hook underneath, bring it through the other side, and pull through. Then from here, again, yarn over and pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. So this is per usual. Then once we have that crossover completed, we have 1 more stitch left to work into. So again, yarn over 1, 2, 3 times. Hang on to your working yarn and pull your work down towards you, finding that 1 skipped stitch. This is my skip stitch that I have left over, so insert your hook underneath, through the other side, yarn over, pull through, Then from here, continue to yarn over and pull through 2 until we all have 1 loop left on our hook. So again, this is per usual. And that is the crossover detail for our second cable. Now, like I said, our cable is always going to be framed with front post trebles. So just into that second to last stitch, we're going to yarn over twice, underneath that second to last half double crochet, through the other side, pull through. Then yarn over and pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left. Then to complete the row, we're just going to half double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. So yarn over, insert your hook into that last stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and that is our row 3 completed. Now every even number row is going to be a single crochet row. So all we're going to do from here is chain 1, flip our work, put 1 single crochet into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of the row. We are back and everyone's row 4 is complete. Now from here we're all going to get started on our row 5, so chain 2 and flip. Now since this is a cable stitch row, we're now going to be working into our previous odd number row. So since we're working on row 5, we're going to be inserting our hook into our row 3s, and that's going to be a little bit easier to look at because they're all going to be our post stitches. So getting this row started, we're all going to start with a front post treble, which is our dividing stitch. That's always going to be the norm. We're going to yarn over twice. Into that first stitch from our previous odd number row, which should be our front post treble that we have right here, bring your hook down, underneath the body of that stitch, through the other side. Then front post treble crochet per usual. Now that we have that completed, we're going to get started on our cable. So to get started on this cable, we're going to put 1 front post treble crochet into the first 2 stitches. So just yarn over twice, underneath the body of that first stitch, with 1 front post treble, underneath the body of that next stitch with another front post treble crochet. Now that we have those 3 front post treble crochets in a row, we're now going to do a set of 2 front post double treble crochets. So yarn over 3 times. We are going to skip 2 stitches from our previous row, then 1 front post double treble crochet into each of the following 2. So bring your hook down, like I said, skip 1, skip 2, underneath that following stitch with 1 front post double treble crochet. So everything is still per usual. We're just going to continue to yarn over 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. Then another front post double treble crochet into that following stitch. So underneath, pull through, and yarn over and continue to pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. Now from here, we're going to work back into those 2 skip stitches, now working into that little window that we made. So 1 front post double treble crochet into each, so yarn over 3 times. Hang on to our working yarn and pull our work down. Finding those 2 skip stitches, here's my first, here's my second. We're going to insert our hook underneath that first skip stitch, through the other side, and pull through. From here, our front post treble crochet per usual, so continue to pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. And that gives us the first stitch for our little crossover, and another front post double treble crochet underneath the following. So yarn over 3 times. Hang on to your working yarn, and we're going to pull our work down. Finding that 1 skip stitch into that window, we're going to insert our hook underneath, through the other side, pull through, then yarn over and pull through 2 until we all have just 1 loop left on our hook. And that is the second stitch of our crossover. Now from here, our following stitch is going to be our dividing stitch, which is a front post treble. So go ahead and get that front post treble crochet completed. And then this cable stitch detail on this side will be done. Now, for those of you that did notice, this cable stitch detail was the exact same as our left cable stitch detail from our row 3. And the next cable stitch detail that we're going to do will be the same as the first cable stitch detail that we did for our row 3. So, before we get that started, we do need to do our Alpine stitch prep. Now, what we're going to do is into the 9th stitch from our previous row, we're all going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets. Now, we do need to count out 9 stitches because we have a total of 8 stitches here for our cable stitch detail. So just taking a look at our previous single crochet row, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Into that 9th stitch, we're going to insert with 3 half double crochets. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, 2 more into that same stitch. So there's my second, there is my third half double crochet. Now we're going to do our cable stitch detail. So getting this started, we're going to start with our dividing stitch, so yarn over twice. Underneath the body of that following stitch, we're going to bring our hook down, underneath, through the other side, and pull through. We're going to yarn over, and pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. Then to do this cable stitch detail, we're going to yarn over 3 times. We're going to skip over the following 2 stitches, then 1 front post double treble crochet into the following 2 stitches. So skip 1, skip 2. Underneath that following with 1 front post double treble. So pull through 2, 2, 2, 2 until we have 1 loop left. Another front post double treble into that following stitch. Then right after that, we're going to be working into those 2 skip stitches with 1 front post double treble crochet into each of those. So yarn over 1, 2, 3 times again. We're going to insert our hook underneath that first skip stitch and continue to pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. Then 1 more into that following skipped stitch. So that's another front post double treble crochet. When that crossover is completed, we're going to close off the row with 1 front post treble crochet into the following 2 stitches. So yarn over twice underneath that following stitch with 1 front post treble, underneath that following stitch with another front post treble crochet. When that's completed, we're going to have 1 more front post treble crochet to do. That is our dividing stitch. That is always going to be our dividing stitch. So yarn over twice and continue to pull through 2. Then close off the row with a half double crochet, just like our previous cable stitch row. So yarn over into that last stitch from our previous row with 1 front post treble crochet. Now everyone's row 5 is complete. Like I said, every even number row is a single crochet row, so chain 1, flip your work, and single crochet back down. We are back and our first 6 rows are complete. Now we're going to do the following 4 rows together, and it will be a repeat of those 4 following rows, but really the cable stitches are going to be exactly the same that we just did. We're just going to be adding some stitches to the Alpine stitch detail. So getting started on our row 7, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. So like I said, for the cable stitch details, that's not including the Alpine stitches in the middle, it's going to be a repeat of rows 3 through 6. So just as a refresher, we're going to start with our front post treble crochet, and since we're working on our row 7, we're going to be inserting our hook into our previous odd number row, which is our row 5. So starting with our dividing stitch, yarn over twice. Underneath the body of that first stitch with 1 front post treble crochet. Then from there, we're all going to do a set of 2 front post double treble crochets. So 1, 2, 3 yarn overs. We're going to skip 1, skip 2. 1 front post double treble crochet into each of the following 2 stitches. Those 2 front post double treble crochets are completed. Then 1 front post double treble crochet into each of the 2 stitches that we just skipped over. So yarn over 3 times into that first skip stitch with our first, and then another into that next skipped stitch. That crossover is now complete. Then we should have 2 available stitches again, 1 front post treble crochet into each of those. When those 2 stitches are completed, complete this cable with our dividing stitch, which is just 1 front post treble crochet. Now to do our Alpine stitch detail, we're going to skip 8 stitches from our previous row, and into the 9th, we're now going to do an increase of 2 half doubles. So counting out from our previous row, here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Into that 9th stitch, we're going to insert with 2 half double crochets. Then into that middle stitch from our previous row's increase, so this is that middle stitch right here, because here's 1, 2, 3 half doubles, we're going to insert with 1 front post double crochet. Yarn over, into that middle stitch, insert your hook in through one side, underneath, and through the other. Yarn over and pull through. When it comes to doing our Alpine stitches and we're doing our front post doubles, we're going to pull up tall when we have these 3 loops on our hook to get the same height as that half double crochet. Then we're going to double crochet per usual. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Once we have that stitch, we're now going to close off our Alpine stitch detail with an increase of 2 half doubles. So yarn over. We are going to skip 1 stitch from our previous row because that front post double crochet counts as that stitch, then into the next with an increase of 2 half doubles. So there's 1 and then there's 2. Now just as a really quick tip, each of our Alpine stitch details per row should have 2 more stitches than the previous row. So just to count this out, we did have 1, 2, 3 stitches from our previous row. Now we should have 5. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're looking pretty good. Now we're going to close off the row with our cable stitch detail. So to finish up this repeat of row 3, we're going to do our dividing stitch, so yarn over twice. Underneath that next available stitch, insert with 1 front post treble crochet. When we have our dividing stitch completed, 1 front post treble crochet into each of the following 2 stitches. When we have those 2 completed, we're going to skip 1, skip 2, then into the following 2, 1 front post double treble crochet into each of those. Now that we have those 2 completed, we're now going to work into those 2 skip stitches in through that window that we just made. So start with a yarn over of 3, hang on to your working yarn, and bring your work down. Finding those 2 skipped stitches, insert your hook underneath that first skip stitch with 1 front post double treble crochet, then repeat into that following skip stitch as well. Now that is this crossover detail, and we're going to close off the row with our dividing stitch, which is a front post treble, then 1 half double crochet into that last stitch from our previous row. Everyone's row 7 is now complete. Now for row 8, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now our first 8 rows are complete, so let's do our row 9. So that is going to be a repeat of row 5, so to get that started, chain 2 and flip. Now we're all going to do our cable stitch detail. So just to talk you guys through it, start off with our first front post treble crochet, which is always our dividing stitch. From there, we're going to be putting 1 front post treble crochet into each of the following 2 stitches. Now that we have those 2, we're going to skip 1, skip 2, 1 front post double treble crochet into each of the following 2. Now that we have those 2, we are going to do our crossover. So 1 front post double treble crochet, working in through that window that we just made. So yarn over 3 times, pull our work down, and put 1 front post double treble crochet into each of those. And now that our crossover is complete, the last stitch, which is our dividing stitch for this cable stitch detail, is 1 front post treble crochet. Now we're ready to do our Alpine stitch detail. Our Alpine stitch detail is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our previous Alpine stitch detail, but like I said, every row will have 2 more stitches in the previous row. So we're going to start by counting out 8 stitches from our previous row and do an increase of 2 half double crochets into the 9th. So let's count this out together. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Into that 9th stitch, insert with 2 half double crochets. There's 1, there's 2. Now a really quick tip when it comes to doing our Alpine stitch detail, each of our stitches need to be staggered from our previous Alpine stitch row, so a front post double will never be worked into a previous front post double. So once we have our increase, we're going to yarn over. Finding that second stitch from our previous Alpine stitch detail, this is my first, this is my second, we're going to insert into that next half double crochet with our front post double crochet. So pull through, again pull up tall, pull through 2, pull through 2. Then we're going to half double crochet, so yarn over. Skip 1 stitch from our previous row because this front post double counts as that stitch, into the next with a half double crochet, and we're just going to continue this until we have 1 stitch left right above our Alpine stitch detail. So since we're alternating between a half double and front post double, and we just completed our half double, we're going to prepare for a front post double. So finding that next half double crochet from our previous Alpine stitch detail, we're going to bring our hook down, underneath, through the other side, pull through. Pull up tall, pull through 2, pull through 2. Then we're at a last stitch for our Alpine stitch detail and just close off this section with an increase of 2 half doubles. So yarn over. Skip 1 stitch from our previous row because this front post double counts as that stitch, and into the next with an increase of 2 half double crochets. And as a really quick tip, again, we should have 2 more stitches than our previous Alpine stitch detail. So looking at the previous row, here is my first, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we should have 7. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're looking pretty good. So now let's close off our row with our cable stitch detail. Start with our front post treble crochet, which is always our dividing stitch. Then we're going to skip the following 2 stitches and put 1 front post double treble crochet into the following 2 stitches. When we have that, we need to do our crossover, so working back into those 2 skip stitches, 1 front post double treble crochet into each of those. And that is our crossover. Close off this cable stitch detail with our 2 front post treble crochets. Then close off the row with our dividing stitch, which is a front post treble, and then a half double crochet into that last stitch. Our rows 1 through 9 are now complete. Again, every even number row is a single crochet row, so chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 single crochet into every stitch. So we are back. We have just completed our first 10 rows together. From here, it is going to be a repeat of rows 7 through 10 until we have a portion that can reach from our waist up to the depth of our desired neckline. So if you guys would like to cover more, do more rows, or if you'd like to show a little bit more, do fewer rows. But either way, I will meet everyone back right after an even number row, right when we're about to get started on a repeat of our row 5. We are back. We have just completed the height of our cable stitch detail. Now I have a total of 20 rows. My height is just about 5 inches or 13 centimeters. Now from here, we're all going to get started on the right side of our cup detail. So what we're going to want to do is first insert our stitch marker into our 2 middle stitches. Now, everyone should have had an even number of stitches for our last row, so we should all have 2 middle stitches. For those of you that have my numbers, I inserted my stitch markers into the 17th and 18th stitch. Now from here, we're going to get started on the following row by starting off our cable stitch detail as our repeat of row 5, so just start it off the same way that we normally would. Then I will meet you guys back when we're about to get started on our Alpine stitch detail. Our repeat of our row 5's first cable is complete. Now from here, we're going to do our normal Alpine stitch detail, so with the increase in everything until we reach our stitch marker stitch. So just as a refresher, into the 9th stitch from our previous row, start with our increase of 2 half double crochets, then into that following stitch with our front post double, and I'll meet you back once we're worked into our stitch marker stitch. Now we've done our Alpine stitch detail all the way down until we're worked into our stitch marker stitch. Now that last stitch should have been a half double crochet into that stitch marker stitch for everyone, and our following row is going to be a solid row. That's going to start and end with a single crochet with 1 half double crochet into every stitch in between just to get some height. Our solid row is completed, so let's all chain 2, flip our work to get started on the following row. And get started on our following row's cable stitch detail, which is going to be a repeat of our row 3's right cable. Then I'll meet you back when we're about to get started on our Alpine. Our cable stitch detail is complete. Now from here, we're going to continue on with our Alpine stitch detail the same way that we've been doing this entire time. So starting that off with an increase of 2 half double crochets. But since this last stitch in the row is actually going to be a front post double crochet, I'm going to meet you guys back before we do that last stitch just to show you how we're going to do our front post double crochet that is still secured down with a half double crochet just to make sure the edge of the row doesn't flop around. So we've made our way down with our Alpine stitch detail, leaving that last stitch. Now everyone's last stitch should be a front post double crochet, so all we're going to do is a front post double crochet combined with a half double. So how that's going to work is yarn over. Into the last half double crochet from our previous row, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and pull through. We're still going to pull up tall, yarn over, and pull through 2, but when we have these 2 loops on our hook, we're now going to yarn over again and insert our hook into the last stitch from our previous row just to make sure that the edge of the row is secured down. We're going to insert, yarn over, and pull through, and that should give us 4 loops on our hook. From here, just yarn over and pull through all 4. Now that this row is complete, do our following solid row. So 1 single crochet into the first and last stitch, and 1 half double into every stitch in between. Now we're going to work our way back down, but now we're going to do a decrease along the inner edge. So we're going to chain 2, flip our work. Start our following row off with a repeat of row 5's right cable. Then go ahead and do your same Alpine stitch detail, so with the increase in everything, making our way down, but leaving the last 4 stitches, and then I'll meet you back. So we're back. We have just completed our cable stitch detail and have made our way all the way down with our Alpine stitches, leaving the last 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Now all we're going to do is simply close off the row with a decrease of 4 double crochets. So it's going to start with the yarn over, inserting our hook into that 4th to last, pull through, 3rd to last, pull through, 2nd to last, pull through, and last, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. What we're going to do is yarn over, pull through the first 5 loops, leaving us with 2, then yarn over, pull through 2. Do our following solid row and I'll meet you back. So what we're going to do is chain 2, flip our work. Start off our following row with our repeat of row 3's right cable. Then again, we're going to do our same Alpine stitch detail, so including that increase, leaving the last 4 stitches, and then I'll meet you back just to do it together once more. So we have done our cable stitch detail, also our Alpine, leaving the last 4 stitches. Now just like how we closed off our previous Alpine stitch detail, we're going to close it off with a decrease of 4 double crochets. So just insert, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through the first 5, leaving us with 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. And now our heart detail for the right side is complete, so go ahead and do a chain of 1 and cut, and then we're going to get started on the other side. So we're back. Since we have just finished one side of our heart detail, we're going to go ahead and do the other side. Just to let you guys know, my total height is roughly 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. Now to get started on the other side, we're going to make sure the work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Then insert our hook into the next middle stitch marker stitch that we have, insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch. We're all going to get started with a front post double crochet. So it is going to be worked into our previous Alpine stitch detail, and our stitches are still staggered, so we're going to need to find the half double crochet that's directly underneath. Now we have one right underneath our chain 2, so just inserting your hook into that half double crochet with one front post double crochet. Pull up tall, pull through 2, pull through 2, and we're going to continue to do our Alpine stitch, including the increase at the very end. So just to do the next half double crochet together, we're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double, and just into that next available stitch that we have. I know that we would typically skip a stitch because that front post double counts as that stitch, but since our chain 2 is in that stitch, that actually counts as a stitch that we're going to skip. So just into that next stitch, insert with a half double, and then continue with our front post double, half double, making our way all the way down, including an increase into that last stitch. So basically the same thing that we've been doing this entire time. Since we're here, might as well close off the row with our repeat of row 5's left cable. That's completely the same, and then I'll meet you back at the end of that row. So we've just made our way all the way down with our first cable stitch row. Our following row is our solid row, so get that completed, then at the end of the row, chain 2 and flip. Now that our solid row is completed, let's get starting on our following cable stitch row. Now our stitches are still staggered, and we still need to do our Alpine stitch detail first, so just start the following row off with one half double crochet, then a front post double crochet, and just continue to do our Alpine stitch all the way down, making sure that we're still doing that increase before our cable. Then once we reach the cable, do a repeat of our row 3's left cable, then get the following solid row completed. At the end of the row, chain 2 and flip. And now we're going to get started on our first decrease row. This is going to start with a decrease of 4 double crochets, just like how this one ended with decrease of 4. So yarn over into that first stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through the first 5, yarn over, pull through 2. Then from here we're going to do our same Alpine stitch detail, so it's going to start with a front post double crochet. Start with a yarn over. Right after that decrease, we're going to trace that all the way down and find our first half double crochet. This is mine right here. It should be directly underneath that empty space. That is going to be where we're going to insert our first front post double crochet, and the rest of this row is going to be per usual. So starting with a half double crochet and front post double crochet, making our way all the way down, we are going to make sure that we're still doing our increase of 2 half double crochets at the end of our Alpine stitch detail, then close off our row with a repeat of row 5's left cable. Then I'll meet you back. Our first decrease row is complete. Our following row is going to be our solid row, so single, 1 half double into every stitch, leaving the last, and closing off the row with a single crochet. Then I'll meet you back. So we're back, we have finished up our solid row, and now we're going to do our last decrease row. It's going to be done pretty much the same way as our previous decrease row. So chain 2 and flip. Start it off with a decrease of 4 double crochets. So there's 1, insert into that second, third, and fourth. Yarn over, pull through 5, yarn over, pull through 2. Then finding our half double crochet from our previous row, insert with a front post double. Then from here, just continue on with the rest of the row per usual with our Alpine stitch, making sure we're doing our increase, and I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed our left cup detail. Now we're going to get started on the side panel. So it's all going to start with a single crochet row. So from where we're at, we didn't need to do a chain up one and cut. We're going to chain one and do a single crochet row down the side of our detail. Now what we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into every side cable, 1 single crochet into every side single crochet row. So getting that started, this is my first side cable stitch row. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. This is my following side row, which is a side single crochet row. So find that top loop and insert with just 1. Let's do that again. Into my next side row, which is a side cable stitch row, insert with 2 singles. This is my next side row, which has a single crochet row, so I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1. We're going to continue on with this till we don't have any more side rows left. Our single crochet row down the side of our cable stitch detail is complete. Now we're going to make our way up with our back loop slip stitch row. So chain 1 and flip. Finding that first stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, into that next stitch's back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. Continue on with this until we make our way all the way down, but making sure that we're not tugging too tight after every stitch, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Our back loop slip stitch row is complete. Now we're going to get started on our following row. So we're going to chain 1 and flip our work. And we're all going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop single crochets. So inserting our hook into that first stitch's back loop, we're going to insert, pull through. Next stitch's back loop, insert, pull through. Next stitch's back loop, insert, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4. Then from here, we're all going to do 10 back loop single crochets, and it is the same for everyone, no matter what size we're making. So just into that next stitch, insert into that back loop with 1 back loop single, then put 1 back loop single into each of the next 9 stitches for a total of 10. We have our decrease and our 10 back loop single crochets. From here, we're going to be putting 10 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over into that next stitch, insert, pull through 3, and continue until you have a total of 10 back loop halves. We now have our 10 back loop half double crochets. Now from here, we're going to be putting 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. So just to do the first, yarn over, into that next stitch's back loop, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I'll meet you back when we have 2 stitches left. We've made our way down with the rest of our back loop double crochets, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're going to close off the row with a decrease of 2 back loop doubles. Start with the yarn over and insert your hook into that second to last back loop, pull through. Into that next stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 4, yarn over, pull through the first 3, giving us 2 loops, then yarn over, pull through 2. Now our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row again, so chain 1, flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. We are back and our first 4 rows for our side panel are complete. What we're all going to do from here is just continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until this top portion that we have becomes 1 inch underneath our underarm. Now in order to figure out that measurement, we do want to make sure that we're placing our first cable stitch row at our waist. And we're just going to continue with this until this scoops down till it's 1 inch underneath our underarm, because that's the width that we need for our armhole. And then once we have that, I'll meet you guys back right after an odd number row. Now the first portion of my side panel is complete. This top portion that I have right here can now curve all the way down till it's roughly 1 inch underneath our underarm. Now what we're going to do from here is just continue on with our rows, so a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, and our half double crochet rows, which are these solid rows, but without any increases along the top. So just to get started on the following row, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back. Our slip stitch row is complete. Now our following half double crochet rows is going to be pretty much the same, but we're not going to be starting off the row with a decrease. So just to talk you guys through it, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work. Do 10 back loop single crochets, 10 back loop half double crochets, then 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, making sure that we're doing a decrease of 2 back loop double crochets into the last 2 stitches. Then I'll meet you back. We are back. We have just completed these 2 rows, and now we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we now have a portion that can reach over to mid underarm. Now we want to make sure that we're placing this at mid chest when we put this up to ourselves. Then I'll meet you guys back right after an odd number row, right after we do a chain up a 1 and cut. So we are back. I have just completed my side panel. Now I have a total of 11 rows. This width at the base is roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters, or my total width also at the base is roughly 7 inches or 18 centimeters. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side, but it isn't reversible, so we're going to have to rework some things. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of our cable stitch detail because we want to start by showing the front of the single crochet row. Now the first 2 rows are going to be the same. We're going to do our single crochet row, putting 2 single crochets into every side cable, 1 single crochet into every side single, making our way all the way up. We should end up with the same amount of stitches as our first single crochet row on this side. Then do our following slip stitch row. Then I'll meet you guys back to get started on our row 3. So we are back. We have just completed our first 2 rows for this side of our side panel. Now our following row is going to be our solid row, which is going to be our back loop doubles, back loop halves, back loop singles. We are going to close off the row with a decrease of 3 back loop singles and start the row with a decrease of 2 back loop doubles. So to get that started, we're all going to chain 3 and flip. Like I said, start the row off with a decrease of 2 back loop doubles, so yarn over. Insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through. Next stitch's back loop, pull through. Should have 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through 3, yarn over, pull through 2. From here, put 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 23 stitches. So we've made our way up with our back loop double crochets, leaving the last 23 stitches. So what we're all going to do now is 10 back loop half double crochets, 10 back loop single crochets. That should leave us with the last 3 stitches. Then I'll meet you back to do our decrease. We've made our way down with our 10 back loop halves, 10 back loop singles. That should have left us with 3 stitches. Now we're going to do our decrease of 3 back loop singles. So to that third to last back loop, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4. So what we're going to do from here is continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as the other side's decrease portion that we have. Once we have that, I will meet you guys back so that we can complete the rest of our side panel together. So we are back. We have just completed the decrease portion of our side panel. Now from here, we're going to continue on with our back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. But when it comes to doing our odd number rows, we are no longer going to be doing the decreases along the top. So just to talk you guys through it, it is going to be the same idea as this side. After our following slip stitch row, we are still going to chain 3, flip our work. Start that following row off with a decrease of 2 back loop double crochets, 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, now leaving the last 20 stitches. Then closing off the row with 10 back loop half doubles, 10 back loop single crochets. Then just continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of rows that we have on this side. Do a chain up 1 cut, and then I will meet you back. We are back. We have just completed the entirety of our front panel. Now my total width, measuring along the base, is now just about 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters that is unstretched. Now from here, we can all get started with the back panel. So what we're going to want to do is start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for our last side row for the front panel. Now you can pick either side and count it out, should be the same. For those of you that have my numbers, I have a total of 32 stitches, so I'm going to start by making a chain 32. But my underarm portion is actually already finished up, so I'm going to be doing a small sample size with you. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a half double crochet. So yarn over, into that chain we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Again, yarn over, next chain, insert, pull through 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last 1. Now that we've made our way down, leaving that last chain, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half doubles. So just yarn over, into that last chain, insert with 2 half double crochets. So there's 1, there's 2. That is our increase. We should have 1 more stitch than chains made. Now everyone's following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row. So chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now that we're at the end of our row 2, we're all going to get started on our row 3, which is basically the same as row 1, but within the back loops. So chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one so we can increase together. Now that we've made our way down with our row 3, leaving that last stitch, into that last stitch, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half double crochets. So there's 1, there's 2. From here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid-underarm across over to the front of our body, so roughly where a bra strap or a tank top strap would lay. Then I'll meet you guys back right after a half double crochet row so we can get started with the shoulder from there. Now, like I said, I already have a portion of my back panel completed. I repeated those 2 rows for a total of 9 rows. The width that I have is roughly 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Then from there, we're all going to make a chain that leads up to our shoulder. Now I needed roughly 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 20. Then from there, we're just going to work on the width of our back panel, which is just solid back loop half double, back loop slip stitch rows. Now, as a really quick tip, when it comes to taking the measurement for the shoulder, we're going to want to make sure that we're placing the tail end of our underarm portion still at 1 inch underneath our underarm because we don't want our armhole to become too wide or too tight. Now, as you guys can see, I already have this portion of my back panel completed, so I'm just going to do the following row with you guys using my sample size. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1, and our following row is a slip stitch row. So into that chain that we blocked off with the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch, and from here continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Then once we reach the body, 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then our following row is going to be a half double crochet row with no increases and no decreases. Then just continue to repeat our back loop half, back loop slip stitch row with no increases, no decreases, working our way across our back until we reach the other side of our neck, roughly where a bra strap or a tank top strap would lay again. Then I will meet you guys back right after a slip stitch row, so along the bottom, then we can complete our underarm together from there. So my back panel is already complete. I have a total of 39 rows now. This width is roughly 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're all going to do our underarm portion. So we're all going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led up to our shoulders. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 20. So along this side, counting from the top, I inserted my stitch marker into the 20th stitch. Now to get started on the following row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 right before our stitch marker, and I'll meet you back. We've made our way up with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. Into the last 2 stitches of the row, we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop half double crochets. So start with the yarn over, insert your hook into that second to last, pull through, into that last, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. Now our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip into every stitch, and just to do the decrease together once more, chain 2, flip our work at the end of that slip stitch row, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches once more. So we've just completed our back loop slip stitch row and made our way back up with our back loop half, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're just going to do our decrease together, so yarn over, into that second to last back loop, pull through, into that last back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. Then continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as our first underarm portion. When we have that, do a chain of 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. So we are back. I've just completed the entirety of my back panel. My total width is just about 10 inches or 25 centimeters. Now from here, we can get started on the top band for the front panel. So taking a look at the front panel, we're all going to make sure that our work is slipped right side up, and we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of our panel. Then we're just going to do a single crochet row, making our way all the way across. Now we have some side rows to work into first. All we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into each of those side rows. So go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. What we're going to do from here is just find that first side row, find that top loop, and start by inserting with just 1 single crochet. Everyone's following side row is a side slip stitch row, so we're going to have to find that top loop, insert your hook, and insert with another single crochet. So we should have 1 single crochet for every row that we have for this side panel. Once we're worked into our side single crochet row right next to our cable stitch detail, along the top we are going to have some regular stitches to work into. So put 1 single crochet into every side row, 1 single crochet into every stitch, and then I'll meet you guys back when we're ready to work our way down the inside of our cup. So we've just made our way all the way up and over our cup. Now we're going to be working into our side rows. So working into our side rows, we're going to be putting 2 single crochet into every side cable, 1 single crochet into every side single. So everyone's first side row should be a side cable stitch row. I'm going to find that top loop and start with 2 single crochets. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Then our following side row is a side single crochet row. So find that top loop and insert with 1. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into, and then I'll meet you back so we can work our way up the other side of our cup. We have just worked our way down our cup. Now we are worked into that last side row, and we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into that last stitch because we are going to need to have 2 middle stitches. Then from here, we're just going to work our way back up. So finding our first side row on the other side of our cup, we're going to start with 2 single crochets, and we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into that first stitch as well. So into that next side row, insert with 1, also with a second, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that first stitch. Then from here, continue with 2 single crochet into every side cable, 1 single crochet into every side single, making our way all the way up. Then 1 single crochet into every stitch, then 1 single crochet into every side row till we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain of a 1 and cut. So we are back. Our single crochet row along the top is complete. Now before we actually get started on the top band, we are going to want to insert our stitch marker into some stitches just so we know where the top band is going to work up to, and then we can get started on the strap. So how we're going to figure that out is we're going to take a look at our back panel. We're going to count the underarm rows that we have. We're going to be counting 2 stitches for every side half double crochet row and 1 single crochet for every side slip stitch row. So as an example, I have a total of 9 underarm rows here. So I will be counting this out together. Here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I have a total of 14 stitches that will be worked into my underarm portion once we get started on the sleeve. So when it comes to doing the front panel, counting from the outer edges, we are going to want to insert our stitch markers into that number that we just counted out together, but whatever your number is. I inserted my stitch marker into my 14th stitch from the outer edge on both sides. Then from here, we can get started on the top band. Once our stitch markers into place, we're all going to make sure the work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Insert our hook into any one of our stitch marker stitches within the middle, and we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook. Now from here, we're going to pull our working yarn through and start with a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to secure. And starting with that same stitch that our chain 1 is in, or our stitch marker stitch, we're all going to start with 2 single crochets. So into that same stitch with 1, and into that same stitch with a second single crochet. Now those 2 stitches count as our first row. Now we're going to connect it into the base, and the base is going to be the single crochets that we just did working towards the outer edge. So finding that next available stitch, this is mine right here, I'm going to insert in through there with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then we do need to work our way up to the following row, so into that next available stitch into the base, we're going to insert in through there as well, and pull through. Now those 2 slip stitches into the base don't actually count as a stitch, and from here we're going to flip our work, then work our way down our row. So those slip stitches into the base don't actually count as a stitch, so finding the last stitch from our previous row, we're all going to insert with 1 back loop slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. Then to increase at the end of the row, we're all going to do an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. So into that last stitch's back loop, we're going to insert with 1 single, into that same back loop with a second single. Now for everyone's row 2, we should all have a total of 3 stitches. Now we need to get started on the following row with an increase as well. So we're all going to chain 2 and flip. And now getting started on our row 3, we're going to slip stitch into that second chain from our hook. So not that first chain, but into that next. We're all going to insert into that back loop with a slip stitch. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So now at the end of our row 3, we should all have 4 stitches. So now that our row 3 is complete, we're going to slip stitch it into the base again. So just like how we did for our previous row, we're going to insert into that next available stitch with a slip stitch. Still doesn't count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. Also doesn't count as a stitch, and flip. Now just to get started on the following row together, we're going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch with an increase of 2 back loop single crochets into that last. So finding the last stitch from our previous row, insert in through that back loop with a back loop slip stitch and continue until we have one stitch left. We made our way down, leaving that last stitch. Into that last stitch, an increase of 2 back loop singles. And now that we have that completed, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we get the top band height that we would like. Then once we have the top band height that we would like, I will meet you back right after an even number row, so along the outer edge. But this is actually the height that I would like for my top band to be. I did just a total of 4 rows, and this height is just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters. From here, we're going to continue on with our back loop slip stitch rows, but now without any increases or decreases, making our way all the way down until we're worked into the stitch right before our stitch marker stitch. So from here, all I'm going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and connect it into the base the same way that we just did. I'll meet you back once we're worked into that stitch that's right before our stitch marker, but I do want to make sure that I'm inserting my stitch marker into the edge of this last row just so I know where this increase portion ends. Then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We've made our way all the way down with our back loop slip stitches until we're worked into the stitch before a stitch marker stitch. Now from here, we're all just going to do more back loop slip stitch rows, but now working off the piece for the same amount of chains that we made that led up to the shoulder when we were doing our back panel. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a total chain of 20 here. So for my front panel, for my strap, all I'm going to do is chain 1. And it doesn't matter if you end along the base of the edge, simply chain 1, flip your work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, chain 1, and repeat for the same amount of rows as chains that we made. Once we have that, do a chain up on 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back. So we are back. We have just made our way all the way up with our strap, and now we're going to repeat everything we did here on the other side, so it is exactly the same. But just to let you guys know, if the strap does look a little bit short, making sure that once we're putting this up to ourselves, we are keeping the top of this underarm portion roughly 1 inch underneath our underarm, and we are stretching this as if we're wearing it, reaching all the way to the top of our shoulder. But go ahead and get this other side completed, and then I will meet you back. So we are back. Both of our top bands are completed. Now from here, we're going to seam everything up, starting with the top band. So making sure that our work is slipped right side out, because this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, we're going to be inserting our hook into our stitch marker side rows within the middle of our top band. Once when our hook is in through both side rows, we are going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and all we're going to do is find that first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, then yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do this again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on our hook. And we're just going to continue doing this till we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. So now that our top band seam is complete, we're now going to seam our shoulders. So we're going to take our front panel, place it down on top of our back panel, making sure that all the detail is faced in on itself. Then we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Now that our hook is in through both the front and the back panel, making sure that our work is flipped wrong side out, we're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then all we're going to do is do a single crochet seam, working in through both the front and the back panel at the same time. I'm going to find that stitch within the front panel, then finding our side row within the back panel, which is a side slip stitch row for everyone. Then I'm going to insert with 1 single crochet. Again, we're going to find our following stitch within the front panel, then our following side row within the back panel, which should be a side half double crochet, insert with 1 single crochet, and since our side half double crochet rows along our back panel are a little bit wider, we're going to be putting 2 single crochets into each of those. So just into that next stitch within the front panel, then into that same side half double crochet row within the back panel, insert with a single crochet, and we're going to continue on with this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we are back. Our shoulder seam is complete, and now we're going to do our side seam. So this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So making sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up, we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. We're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. First stitch into the back panel, only in through that back loop, then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. First stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, and continue this till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, repeat on the other side and I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed doing our side seams. Now we're going to get started on the sleeve. So first things first, we're all going to make sure that it works with right side out, right side up. Insert our hook into any stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam within our armhole. Then from here, we're going to do a single crochet row. Working our way up our front panel, if we could be working our way up the back panel, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then into every side slip stitch row, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row. If you are working into the back panel first, we're going to be putting 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip, then 1 single crochet into every stitch. But go ahead and make your way all the way up. I will meet you back when our last stitch is worked into the stitch that's right before our shoulder seam. We've made our way all the way up to our shoulder seam. Now we're going to work our way back down, but we do need to know where our 2 middle stitches are. So start by inserting your stitch marker into the last stitch that we have on this side of our shoulder seam. Then on the other side, we're going to start our first single crochet. I'm working towards the back, so I'm just going to find that first stitch and insert with a single crochet and insert my stitch marker into there. But for those of you that are working your way towards the front panel, find your first side row, do a single crochet into that top loop, then insert your stitch marker into there. You should have 2 middle stitches, and from here, just work your way back down the other side. Then slip stitch into that chain space. Then, as a really quick tip, we should have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our stitch markers. Then I will meet you back. So we are back. Our single crochet row is complete, and now from here we're going to switch out to our 6mm hook, then make a chain the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. So I've already measured mine out. I like for mine to be roughly 16 inches or 40 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain of 70. Then we get started on our following row. We're all going to start by blocking off that last chain and chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet, and into that chain that we blocked off, the 3rd chain from our hook, insert with 1 half double crochet. So pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. From here, continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. So we've made our way down with our first row, leaving that last chain. Into that last chain, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half doubles. So into that last chain with 1, same last chain with a 2nd. Now from here, we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So just finding that next available stitch into the base, we're all going to insert our hook with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then we need to work our way up to the following row, so slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip. Then starting our following row off with an increase, yarn over and inserting into the last stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches. We're going to insert into that back loop with 1, then with a 2nd back loop half double, then from here 1 back loop half double into the rest of our stitches. Then just to do the increase together once more, at the end of our row 2, chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving that last stitch. Then I'll meet you back. We are back. We've just made our way down with our 3rd row. We should all have 1 stitch left. Now we're going to do our increase together again. So yarn over into that last stitch's back loop with 1, same back loop with a 2nd. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So just into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base and flip. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we're worked into our first stitch marker stitch. Once we are, I will meet you guys back, then we can make our way down with the decrease side of our sleeve. So we are back. We've made our way all the way up with our back loop half double crochet rows, and we have worked into our stitch marker stitch. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did here, but instead of increases, it's going to be decreases. So I actually ended along the outer edge. What I'm going to do is chain 2, flip my work. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now, if those of you ended along the base, you guys are just going to slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip your work, and then I'll meet you back. So I've made my way down with my first decrease row, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now whenever we start along the outer edge and working our way down into the last few stitches, we're all going to do a decrease of 2 back loop half doubles. So yarn over into that second to last back loop, pull through, then into that last back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. Now we're going to slip stitch it into the base the same way that we've been doing. I'm now going to take out my stitch markers and just slip stitch it the same way that we've been doing this entire time to close off the row and to work our way up to the following row. Now everyone should be along the base. Working our way back out, we're going to start the row off with a decrease, so go ahead and flip your work. And we're going to decrease. So yarn over into that first stitch's back loop, making sure we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base. We're going to insert, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4, then continue with 1 back loop half double into the rest of our stitches. Then just continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all up together. We are back. We have just completed the decrease side of our sleeve. Now from here, we're going to seam it all together. So this is going to be a single crochet seam. We're all going to start by making sure that our work is flipped wrong side out. Then we're just going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Yarn over, pull through everything, and we're just going to single crochet in through both the front and back panel at the same time. So just to do the first one, finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet around everything. And that's it. We're just going to continue on with our single crochet seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I will meet you guys back so we can get started on the cuff. So we are back. We have just completed seaming up our sleeve, and now we're going to get started on our cuff. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning the seam that we just did is now along the inside. Then we're going to be inserting our 5mm hook into any one of the side rows along the edge of our sleeve. Then we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then all we're going to do is 1 single crochet into every other side row. So starting with that same side row that our chain 1 is in, insert with a single crochet. You're going to skip 1 into the top of the next with another single crochet. We're just going to continue on with a single crochet row, making our way all the way around. We are back and our single crochet row is complete. Now from here, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the cuff to be. I'd like for mine to be a little bit longer, so just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 13. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a slip stitch row all the way down. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, so that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch. Now when we're making our way down, putting 1 slip stitch into every chain, make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. But all we're going to do from here is continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now that we've made our way all the way down with our slip stitch row, we're now going to connect it into the base. Now connecting it into the base is going to be done exactly the same way that we connected the top band to the front panel. So just as a refresher, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base to connect. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the next row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and from here put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So just like how we did the top band, we are not going to be working into any of those slip stitches into the base, insert into that back loop with a slip stitch, and from here continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then all we're going to do from here is continue to repeat our 2 previous rows, working in within the back loops for every row with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We have just completed the cuff, and now we're going to seam it together. Now, as you guys can see, I have already done my seam. The seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way as the side seam, which is an outside loop slip stitch seam. So first, start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, then do the same exact outside loop slip stitch seam so we don't have any more stitches left. Then, when we have that completed, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. Now that our sleeves are completed, the last thing we're going to have to do is our bottom band. So first things first, we're all going to start by making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, then insert our same 5mm hook into any one of the siders that we have along the bottom of our piece. All we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into every side double/half double crochet row, and 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch. So let's just get that started together. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now my first side row is this side double crochet row. So all I'm going to do is find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. There's 1 single crochet and 1 more into that same top loop with another. My following side row is a side slip stitch row, so find that top loop and insert with just 1 and make our way all the way around. Once we reach underneath the bottom of the cables, simply put 1 single crochet into every stitch, and I'll meet you back once the single crochet row is complete. But just as a really quick tip, the single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch, so once it's completed, try your piece on, making sure that everything is still fitting nicely. If it's a little too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, you do some stitches with a tighter grip. So now that we've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row and everything is fitting nicely, the next thing we're going to do is our bottom band, which is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our cuff. So just to talk you guys through it, after we've slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to start by making a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 10. Then just do our back loop slip stitch rows with absolutely no increases, no decreases, making our way all the way around. When we have that completed, I'll meet you back to seam it all together. And we have now made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. Now, since this is back loop slip stitch rows, like our cuff, it is going to be seamed like our cuff and our side. So just do another outside loop slip stitch seam, then do a chain up a 1 and cut. Then once we have that completed, we are all done. The last thing we have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.